Thank you. Good morning, everyone. My name is Natalie Fanny Gonzalez. This is the Economic Development Committee work session. We have 3 items today. One is going to be on the quarterly economic indicators, and it's going to be led by the Montgomery County Planning Department alongside MCEDC, but mostly the planning department. Then we're going to talk about, as we did last week with incubators, we're going to have a couple sessions for the FY25 budget follow-up, one on MCEDC, and then after that, we're going to have the Economic Development Fund. With that, I'm going to ask council staff to kick us off, and then please share the mic with planning and CDC.
Thank you. Good morning. Yes, this is just the briefing on the two most recent quarterly economic indicators reports from MCEDC and planning. They typically provide an overview of data and trends on employment, real estate development, and venture capital. And then also provide a few special briefings that do a deeper dive into specific economic issues. I'll defer to planning to cover those, but today the 2 special briefings are related to the labor force as well as child care costs in the county.
Get the slides up. Yeah. So while he's doing that, actually, I just want to, acknowledge that these are, first there's two issues since we didn't come for the third quarter of 2024. So there's a lot of information, but also, these are, as we've constantly acknowledged, they're kind of, looking in the past because we're waiting for the data. So we're a quarter behind, and some of the things, even, talking about labor force may even seem a little kind of like, out of place at this moment, because clearly, the thing that's on everyone's mind is the federal layoffs for so much of our county that's really affecting people. And, people are really struggling with this right now and all the uncertainty. So I just want to acknowledge that, because we have a little bit that we'll talk about that, but we don't really have, the full set of indicators to do that. So just want to acknowledge that, that's on our minds, and it's something that we will be tracking as we go forward. But with that, we can dive into the indicators. And thanks, Frankie's going to start us off.
There we go. Hi. Yes, nice to be with you this morning. I'm Frankie Clogston. I'm the Vice President for Research and Policy with the Montgomery County Economic Development Corporation. And I believe there may be a slide coming up, which is going to give you just some highlights. We're going to spend a little bit less time on demographics and characteristics of the economy and the real estate market than we usually do, so that we can get to the special reporting on the labor force and the child care, which is quite important, and which we'll be hearing more about shortly. But I will take you through a couple indicators. And first of all, the unemployment rate is 2.4%. And that's actually gone up a little bit, but it is lower than 1.8%. And it's certainly lower than the national rate. So on the one hand, we should feel good about our economy having such a low unemployment rate. On the other hand, we should really be a little bit concerned that there are not more people who are in the labor force. So moving on to the office vacancy rate, everybody's always concerned about that figure. It's at 18.5% now versus 17.4%. And let me just say that this is this fourth quarter versus a year ago, quarter 4, 2023. So it's up to 18.5% versus 17.4%. But that actually conforms with what we're seeing in the DMV. And you can see that in the various quarterly indicators that are listed for Maryland as well as Virginia jurisdictions. And then moving on to median home price, that's gone up, and it's gone up from 554 to 615,000. And that's a significant increase of 11%. Since we started tracking it by product type, which we were asked to do, we saw, for example, that single family housing, went up to just over $1 million. So it's very it's quite, people are quite cost burdened out there, regardless of what product type they're looking for. And the supply is also constrained, is what we're seeing in many different product types. However, that is something that's potentially in flux, given where federal employees end up if they face burdens in the housing market and whether or not they are able to stay in Montgomery County. And again, that's kind of when moves us over to look at the condo sales prices. Now, those are actually going up, it's indicated, and then building permit data is going down, but that's just a little bit. And actually, while it's going down quarter over quarter for the year, if you look at 2023 to 2024 for the calendar year at a whole, we actually are up on that. So, you know, we are kind of ticking upward with sales. And VC raised, it looks like it's going down, but if you look over the last 3 quarters, you'll actually see that the number of transactions and deals is about the same. So you're just talking about deals at a lower level, and you're talking about a VC market that is affected by low interest rates. So, you know, that's kind of a macro conditions that we are partially facing, that other communities are also facing around the country. So those are highlights. And otherwise, you can see here that we're moving on to Ben's topic, which is to start in on the components of the labor force and really break that down for us.
Yeah, so this is well, maybe this isn't, so it's partly about the labor force, but mainly what this is about the federal employment. We do kind of periodically a census or a survey, whatever you would want to call it, where we really, you know, we want to figure out exactly how many people are working for the federal government in Montgomery County, which, believe it or not, is actually not as straightforward as you may think. Some of the data sources are not perfect. So what we do is, we did this last in 2018 and we updated it. We were working on it towards the end of last year, where we look at all of our data sources. We even look through media reports about, you know, how many people might be working at certain federal campuses or changes in that. We contact all of the agencies because we want a really good updated number for what's actually there. So this is the result of that. So it kind of serves, and we really stopped, you know, basically at the end of last year. So it really kind of serves as a benchmark. There's actually there's two full, if you go to the next one, it's a large table because we fit all the agencies that we have on there. So there's 2 full, slides there. There's, but it's really the most updated number. It's our estimates. None of it should be construed as like exact because it's kind of hard to, to pin that down, but it's our best estimates from planning as to how many people prior to basically the inauguration were working on federal sites, either, tied to them, working on them remotely, working for them remotely, and the contractors who work at the site, not the whole contractor industry that may work for other firms. But so we're up to about 78,000 is what we counted. And of course, we'll continue to the extent that we can, we will continue to track that as it changes. So I think we can probably skip this slide because that's just kind of going over the same. Okay, so we'll be jumping around for a lot of topics here, but we are at multifamily rentals. And one of the reasons, so with real estate here, just wanted to do a breakdown to kind of illustrate the segmentation in the housing market. Because a lot of times we just talk about like, here's the housing prices, here's, vacancy rates, but, there is, it differs depending on ownership or rental, based on size, whether it's attached or detached. So first, just starting with multifamily, I think the point here is to look at, this is just showing overall average effective gross rent from 2023 quarter 4 to 2024 quarter 4, and it's gone up a bit, actually not quite as fast as inflation. Inflation has outpaced it, and the other thing about this is that if you look at, just looking at the quarter 4 average rents, they're about kind of between what somebody at 65% of area median income, family of three, but about between what a family of three and a family of two would be expected to pay under most of our housing programs. So, you know, the countywide average rent is not necessarily, you know, astronomically high. I mean, I don't mean to suggest it's cheap, you know, that's a lot of money to shell out for somewhere to live, but but it's not astronomically high. Now, this varies a lot, of course, by geographic location. There are some places that are quite much more expensive than this. And this isn't accounting for bedrooms and quality and things like that. So you're gonna have a lot more on the higher side of this, but just, you know, just as a data point, it's not excessively high, and it's on par. It's a market rate that's on par with some of our actual programs, you know, our housing programs. And so moving to the next slide, here's where we're breaking down home sales by size, basically by bedrooms, and then by whether it's attached or detached. And so, you know, just some of the things to focus on here. If you look down all the way at the 4 or more bedrooms and you compare, just looking at the fourth quarter of 2024, you know, you compare the detached versus attached, you know, detached traditional single family, attached would basically a townhome. And, you know, neither of them are what anyone would call affordable, right? They're, you know, even townhomes with 4 bedrooms are almost $750,000, but they are about $350,000 cheaper than the average single family detached house. So you do get, you know, you pay a premium, or you could think about it as getting a discount for the idea of basically something being attached. And so that's just, so it's affordable to not everybody, but a lot more people than a single family home would be. And that goes for whenever you get to attached versus detached, that kind of goes across the board. Then, and Frankie earlier had highlighted the idea of the condos and co-ops, which we haven't paid much attention to till now, but they're actually one of the things, and we'll get to this on a slide in a couple slides from now. They really serve as like the kind of affordable ownership entry points for the county. And I wasn't aware of how many there are. Again, this will be on another slide, but they really, you know, the average one, it has risen significantly, but at you know, about $400,000, it's a pretty affordable option for home ownership in the county. So if you could go to the next one, we'll talk a little more about that. So this one is just looking at, again, it's another way to visualize like the segmentation of the for sale market. And this is just looking at all of 2024, the total sales by basically whether it's attached or detached. And so there's a lot more detached kind of that's the blue green bar that goes, those go to, you know, they skew to the higher end of the price range, where you have in contrast for the attached, the townhomes, you have them more, that's the red bar where you have them more on the lower end. So just once again showing that you can get that discount for the attached versus detached. Now, if we go to the next one, this was actually surprising to me. I hadn't looked too much into condos or co-ops before, but there's like about 2,500 sales represented in this chart, which I was surprised that there were that many of them. Now, and a lot of them, you know, more than half of them are actually in the, you know, under the $400,000 range. So it really is. Now, it really is an affordable option. There's the problem with this, and I don't really have the data yet, but this is something that we can look into. And I've heard from talking to people kind of anecdotally that a lot of these, you know, it's obviously the owners of these are going to be on the lower income side. And I think a lot of the boards, the associations are really struggling with backlogs of maintenance because it's just really hard to raise that kind of money. And, you know, the problems can kind of continue and grow on themselves. So I think, again, that's just kind of a little kind of anecdotal data point there, but just something that I think is worth raising. So I think we'll go. Let's, you know what, since time's running short, why don't we skip building permits? The point of that slide was just to show that most of our permits are for multifamily housing. 70% of our permits over the last 6 years have been for multifamily, because that's, you know, what we got space for and zoning for. So I'm going to talk quickly here about labor force. And again, I understand that, you know, with a lot of people losing or fearing losing their jobs, this is, you know, it sounds a little bit, you know, anachronistic, but it is a long-term structural problem that I think we still is going to always apply. So main facts here about this is that first you can see from this chart that labor force was actually growing fairly steadily well until about 2013. Could debate a lot of reasons for that. Probably sequestration had to do with that. We've seen a lot of our economic data points kind of flatten out at that right around 11, 12, 13. Probably various reasons that we don't really have time to get into here, but we definitely see the labor force flattening out after 2013. And then actually, if you look to around 2018, that's when the dip happens. So 2 years before the pandemic is when our Montgomery County's labor force actually started declining. So it's really not necessarily even pandemic related, although our failure to get kind of back up to where we were probably does have something to do with the pandemic. So if we want to move to the next one, this is just showing that Montgomery County, which is that red line at the bottom, is our labor force has grown slower than all of the larger geographic areas that contain us, the state, the region, the country. So we are kind of, we've been slow in that. If we go to the next one, sorry, I'm going, just trying to fit everything in here. That's just size. Let's skip that for now. That's just labor force size by 10-year age group. Most of the labor force is in 25 to 54. And then, as people age and it becomes much more common to work, 55 to 64. So that's a big chunk of our labor force also. Okay, so with this one, this chart is showing the net change in labor force for each of those 10-year age groups. The main one to pay attention to here, some went up, some went down. I'll show you how they went up and down relative to other places, because there's a lot of larger demographic trends going on here that are the same for everywhere, and it's a matter of whether you're keeping up or falling behind. But really, it's that 25 to 34-year-old age group that's our the group that lost the most. It's that entry level, kind of just starting their career. That's where Montgomery County has been struggling to get, keep or retain. So we lost about 12,000 of those. This is from 2013 to 2023. This chart shows this is showing where Montgomery stacks up relative to, in this case, the DC metro region and national trends. And so what you can see, with the exception of the 16 to 24-year-old age range, which is a very small portion of the labor force, for Montgomery County, which is that red bar, when we gained labor force, we gained slower than all of the other places. When we lost labor force, we lost faster, and for any age range other than the very young 16 to 24 age range. And if we go to the next one, we can see that the largest, now, of course, we're very far behind in the 75 and over. Again, that's a very small age group. That's a lot, retirement has a lot to do with that and moving. But the main one to focus on is again, the 25 to 34-year-old age range, where we're basically 20 points behind the national trend. So really, really slipping in that kind of, that young, starting out their career group, which is concerning. Okay, and lastly, sorry for this kind of whirlwind, but we're gonna switch to childcare. And I will go. This is from the third quarter issue. I will. So really, there's a couple main points about it. One of the interesting things is that, so demographically, fertility is down. This is global. This is not just Montgomery County. People are having less children. So Montgomery County has fewer children than it used to. The interesting thing, though, is that Montgomery County's young children, or that we have about the same amount of young children, even though we have fewer children overall. We have about the same, slightly more young children with no basically stay-at-home parent, with either one parent who's in the workforce or two parents, both of whom are in the workforce, which ostensibly means you would need more childcare than you may have had in the past. Again, it's not a direct indicator, but it is some sort of indicator. And then the other thing, private sector childcare employment has not recovered to its peak from before the pandemic, but it's a bit higher than it was a decade ago. So kind of rose a little bit and then got flat. We've got a little bit more childcare establishments. And these, by the way, we're talking about the private childcare sector. So this isn't any sort of public school related program. This is all private. The establishments had gone up. They're more than they were, again, a decade ago, but the numbers have been declining since the pandemic. Wages of childcare workers, no surprise, are fairly low. but about 40% of the county's area median income. And they've gone up, but they haven't, since 2021, they have not kept up with inflation. And then, just lastly, it's a tricky, there's definitely an economic argument for childcare, but there's also, obviously a social one, and because it benefits so many people on many time scales. So I think we can probably skip all the charts that went along with that. And I think that actually concludes this, this section, unless anyone wants to dive into more of the data, but I know there's a lot to do today, so.
Thank you so much, Dr. Kraft and Dr. Clockstone, for your presentations. I thought it was detailed. And again, a reminder that we need to change quite a few things, especially things that we should be doing, targeting young professionals so they can move and stay here in Montgomery County. That's a big thing. I wanted to highlight a couple of things you said, especially at the beginning. I think it was like the second slide. On the office market and housing. As everybody know, this is an issue that on the office market, the Economic Development Committee for over a year, we held a couple of work sessions focused on the office market and what we can be doing as a county to tackle the situation of vacant buildings. And then at the same time, the issue with housing, as you very well explain, the attached versus detached homes, the price of them is a big deal. And the need of having more homes in the county is not just a narrative or people just talking about it, is a fact. That we need more housing, especially for people who are making, just putting in numbers, $70,000, $80,000 a year. Couples who are making less than $150,000 a year. It's critical that we do that. That is why, and this is a session, so I think I can say it. We are moving forward with a package called that I'm doing together with Council member Andrew Fritzen, who's here to my right, by the way. Tackling those two issues on the office market and on the housing front. Everybody should know that we have our public hearing tomorrow, March 11. Look forward for MCDC to sign up to testify and show the data. That's all you need to do, show the data. And I'm going to be taking quite a few of your slides for my next presentation, by the way, especially the ones talking about the medium household. And the need is real. So I wanted to start there. And then perhaps in the next two items, the issue on young professionals. We probably won't tackle this during the budget, but at some point we need to come together and see what's the strategy from MCDC, from the business center, from the county as a whole, talking about that. I'm gonna open it up for questions right now. I'm gonna start with Council Member Glass, and then Council Member Lorraine Sells, and Council Member Balcom, and then we'll take it from there. And please be mindful of the time because we have two more items after this.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I will be brief. I know we have a lot to discuss this morning. I just want to highlight two data points that I think are critically important to this conversation and more broadly, the discussions that we're having here in the county and in the DC region. The federal employment data as of January 2025. Important distinction there, as of January 2025. The number that you came up with is 78,000, is that correct? There's been lots, I've seen on census anywhere from 50 to 70. 70 has been the preferred number in the media, but you have determined it is 78,000. So give or take, understood. I will start using 78,000 as of January 2025. Unfortunately, we know that number is lower now.
Can I just, I'm going to harp on a nuance here, if you don't mind, just because this is important. 70,000 people that live in Montgomery County that work for the federal government, about 78,000 who work at locations for the federal government in Montgomery County, regardless of where they live. probably a
So the
lot of overlap.
70,000
Yeah, so the
was fine.
70,000
Okay.
is about right. Yeah,
Great.
they might work in DC or
70,000
Virginia,
Montgomery
yeah.
County residents work for the federal government and 78,000 federal employees.
Exactly.
Got it.
Yeah.
Okay. The other data point that is alarming is the home sales price year over year and the 30% increase for detached two-bedroom homes, otherwise known as starter homes. The demand is real. We are not supplying enough starter homes, which is the through line for all the other data about why young people are not moving to Montgomery County. You know, we've talked about this now for more than a decade, going back to former County Executive Leggett and the Nighttime Economy Task Force, trying to figure out why young people were not moving here. And this is a persistent problem. It needs tackling, and we need to fix it. I yield back.
Thank you, Councilmember Sales.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And thank you for the quarterly report. I think, as we all know now, is more important than ever before to look for trends and also be prepared for opportunities. In addition to the numbers mentioned by Councilmember Glass, I am curious to see if we've drawn any conclusions about what's causing Montgomery County to lag behind the national and regional labor growth trends, being the economic engine of the state, the third largest biotech. I'm just wondering what are we thinking? Is it education? Is it the housing? If there's any conclusions or ideas behind why we're seeing this trend.
Well, I think Councilmember Glass said it, you know, and so did Councilmember Fanny Gonzalez, which is the conclusion I think I personally keep coming back to, which is largely housing. It's not the only thing. I think there's there's some circularity going on when you don't have enough housing, and then, you know, jobs don't come here because of housing costs, because maybe the talent or the labor pool isn't there because they haven't been there because of the housing in the first place. So it does create kind of a circular process. You know, again, I don't think that there isn't a, you know, a large university in our county. There's one nearby. There's a lot of universities in DC that could have something to do with it. You know, so there's probably multiple trends, but of course I would say that probably is one of the main ones. Also, you know, I think the industries that we have, we have every industry. We have a lot of especially high-tech industries, but there's other places that if you're going to be in tech, which is, you know, probably it's a very popular industry for young people. We're not the first place on the list that you would come. So things like that, government, isn't necessarily bad, and we'll see what happens in the future. But I think it's all the above, especially housing.
And so what are we doing to mitigate some of these impacts?
Well,
Yeah.
hopefully, it sounds like we've got some housing bills
bills,
coming
yeah.
coming online, and it
So are
sounds
there
like
any ideas about how to attract different industries, how to attract people to stay here, any incentivized measures that we're working with our businesses to
I think
create?
I'll probably I think that some of those things will come up
Come up.
when MCA EDC
Just the job.
in their
Mhm.
sessions later. So
Yeah, and I will let my colleagues speak more to this, but I think Councilmember Glass is honing in on the fact that it's the attached units that are those that are in demand is, I think, really important as we all kind of target our efforts and think about, you know, honestly, while we would like to have, we may want to have density. We may want to also trade that off for what the market is telling us in terms of what kind of housing people, especially young people who are settling in and represent kind of today's workforce and tomorrow's workforce really are looking for.
And I know that some of our young people are also thinking about becoming their own bosses. Are we seeing a trend towards more entrepreneurs? We just had a discussion about our incubators. Are we seeing an increase?
I am not familiar with either entrepreneurship or like sole proprietorship trends. That's definitely something we can look at.
Yeah.
We'll see if we have, I'm not sure if it's available. It's at like a county level, but we can definitely
Could be at
look
the
at
state
that.
level.
Yeah. Mhm.
With, I mean, if they're filing their taxes
Mhm.
and with that requirement that was due, I
Mhm.
believe March was the deadline for people to file their taxes if they have an LLC. So
Mhm.
it would be good to see if there's an increase since the pandemic on people becoming sole proprietors, starting businesses.
Yeah, and the county, or rather the county business patterns that come out of the census track new business starts.
Okay.
So it's possible that that's something that we could track and
Yeah.
see if it's changed over the last
Yeah.
year. During COVID,
Mhm.
entrepreneurship was
left.
on the rise, right?
Yeah.
Because a lot of people lost their
Yeah.
day jobs and had to find a way to make ends meet.
Mhm.
And entrepreneurship by people of color was also very much on the rise disproportionately. So these are things that we could perhaps track. We're
Definitely.
early, very early
Yes, yes.
into the effects of knowing what changes we're seeing
Mhm.
as a result of kind of structural changes in the workforce, but it's something we can track moving forward.
Yeah, I'd like to see those numbers. Thank you, I yield.
Just alongside that, and we mentioned it last week in the incubator conversation, I was on a call on Friday with the executives team and MCDC and the Small Business Center team regarding this effort, and I'm very proud, by the way, this effort that is going to be launched probably by Thursday of this week, making sure that we are all the folks who are being laid off by the federal government, they have a way to see Montgomery County as a place to start a business, to connect with the private sector. Also, the different chambers were at this call on Friday, by the way. And basically, it's going to be a landing page where folks can see what we're doing in Montgomery County to support them, either by connecting them to a job or by helping them start a new job, which was, goes by the same line of thought as Councilmember Sales. So stay tuned on that one. Councilmember Balkan.
Thank you. Thank you for the data. It's always very interesting to get it, and I like the focus areas as well. Just a couple things. From the federal employment, I think it's important for everyone to understand that distinction between the number of federal jobs in Montgomery County versus the number of residents in Montgomery County who work for the federal government. Both of those data points are very important to our economy for different reasons. They're different data points. So it's important that we're tracking both of them. But at the end of the day, they're both humans who are losing their jobs and families and that impact. So it's important to make sure we keep that distinction in mind when we talk about federal jobs here in Montgomery County. The other thing is condos. I think it's important to, when we look at condos and the cost of condos from a financial affordability concept, we remember the condo fees.
Yeah.
And the issue with that is that homeowners don't have a lot of say in how quickly those fees raise. So I think it's always important to remember that element when we talk about affordability of the condo market. Young adult labor force, it's an issue that we've talked about a lot in the past. One of the things I always think about is, our world-class education, MCPS, K through 12, and we provide a world-class education, and then we send them out into the world, and they leave. And the issue is, do they come back? And so I am concerned about that data point, and I believe that housing is the number one issue there, and so we have to be able to do something about that. And then just one last comment about the childcare, very important information. is there a connection with the Children's Opportunity Alliance with this data?
We have not, I have not discussed any of it with them. I saw the session, I think when they came to you all.
Yeah.
As a full council, but no, I haven't discussed it with them. but-
Yeah, I think that would be a really important connection for
Okay.
them because you have the data and you have the ability to mine the data. So I think that would be a great connection for you. And this is really rich data and I would assume would be of great service to them. So thank you.
Yeah, I'll reach out.
So let's make sure that we connect and send the data to them.
Sure.
Councilmember Fritzen.
Thank you very much. Appreciate allowing me to join the committee. The data is sobering, and it's getting more sobering by the minute with everything that's happening at the federal level. We're losing workers at a higher number than other jurisdictions around the region, throughout the country, and we're gaining at a lower number. I mean, that should be blaring, flashing red lights for all of us. The region is not doing particularly well compared to the country. And that's a part of the story that has been lost. And we're not competing particularly well within the region.
Right.
And we had historically been a region that was stronger than nearly any other region in the country. And within the region, we had gotten a disproportionate share of the strength of the greater capital area in Montgomery County. We were the strongest, and we no longer are in that position. And we need to make some changes. We need to be much more intentional, much more aggressive in what we're doing. And the 25 to 34 age bracket is just a huge, huge challenge. I'm glad that the through line of housing and jobs and housing has been really lifted up here. This is something that the data is screaming at us, and it's something that our businesses have been saying for years and years, that this is a huge challenge. Their inability to recruit and retain employees is directly related to the inability for their employees to afford to live here. It's a huge challenge, and we need to be really serious about it. I'm glad childcare is also part of the presentation. There's a reason why Montgomery Moving Forward is a coalition. It's not just nonprofits and childcare providers, it's businesses and employers who have been at the center of that issue. We really need to be moving forward with much more urgency on those issues. That's why the U.S. Chamber of Commerce has taken this up as a huge issue, because there's a real recognition that if you want to support the workforce, you need to make sure that you're supporting the people who are in the workforce. And that means parents, working parents who have kids. I'm glad that the county has stepped up in this area with parental leave and other changes that we have made, but we need to really be focused on that as well. And in terms of, what we're doing about it, we'll talk about this later, but, we do have an economic development strategic plan. We need to be executing that. We need to be focusing on the metrics and holding ourselves accountable to that. We'll talk more about that in a minute. I did have a particular question here. In terms of the federal workers, and I understand the distinction, both are important. I'm glad Councilmember Balcom noted this. Workers are important, even if they don't live in Montgomery County, because they are part of the economic activity. They support other businesses. They support other workers. There are indirect and tertiary economic impacts and benefits from workers. There's a revenue impact if you live here in terms of your income tax and other revenues. So both matter. Both are things that we should be focused on. Do we have data on federal contractors? I know it's harder for us to figure out, and particularly not just those who work at a federal contractor, but those who are federal contractors who are receiving their paycheck directly from the federal government. I think of USAID workers in particular. The overwhelming number of USAID workers are contractors. They're not officially federal employees. They're particularly at risk with everything that's going on right now because they have no federal protections. It's a separate dynamic, but related.
Yeah.
But do we have any data or understanding of what that number would be?
Not at the moment, but I think it's a good point and it's something that, yeah, I think we should definitely be looking into in the future. So I think there's probably a few ways we can get at that if there isn't a dedicated list of, contractors. I think we can look for that. So, so yeah, not at the moment, but it's definitely something we'll put on our, agenda.
I think that's really important because it certainly matters for the employee of what protections they have and
Mhm.
how this is all going to play out. There are different impacts for the county, for the impact that it has on our communities, on the county budget, on our revenues, on the strength of the fabric of everything that we do. It doesn't really matter whether they're a contractor or a federal employee. If they're at risk, if they're going to lose their job, the impacts on them and on their family and on the county and our community are the same. And so if we can hone in on that number and those data points, I think it's going to be really important for us to work through and figure out, just to understand the magnitude of the challenges that we're going to face. Thank you.
I can say that that is one thing that MCEDC is working on. We're doing it on really a business by business, contractor by contractor, methodology, because it's hard to kind of capture the universe of just how many contractors are out there. We found certainly at least 1,000 among the companies that we've talked to. We approach these companies when we can, and we approach these companies that we know have been affected, and we continue to try to add, not head counts, but add and to the list and get a better, more enriched understanding of who's being affected, not just USAID, but we've seen potentially NASA. We've seen other agencies that have had federal contractors, and we've seen the effects of. Go ahead, Councilwoman, because that's about it. I was just finishing my sentence saying that that is an effort we're engaged in, but it's a difficult net to cast that net.
I appreciate it. I mean, I think it's gonna be very difficult to go business by business and try to figure out what that number is. I mean, we're going to need to find a more aggregate way of doing it, through federal agencies or through some other data point that we figure out. I think it's important to do the business by business work. I think that's a key part of what we want to occur, but to get a real grasp on the number, I think canvassing individual businesses and adding to the number, one job or 10 jobs at a time, it's just going to be very difficult for us to have a meaningful data point there. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm going to speed this up because we are against the time. So comments and questions, please brief. I just also want to highlight that there have been 12,000 unemployment filings in DC. That includes county residents. That's data right there. Thank you so much for your time and your presentation. We look forward to continue working with you all. Next, we are going to have FY25 budget follow-up with the Montgomery County Economic Development Corporation and CDC. If we can have the board president join us. I think it's her first time here, Ms. Fine, or second time. That's right, second time here. It's been a while. Well, thank you for being here today. And before we kick it off, I just want to state on the record, the MCDC, as you all know, you're required to submit a draft of the county's economic development strategic plan by July 1st, 2025. We all know there are some important transitions happening within MCDC. There was a letter that was sent by MCDC to the then Council President Fritzen, who's right here, and to me as chair of the Economic Development Committee. Then we responded to that letter through the new Council President Stewart, and we have decided that we are gonna wait until May of this year to hear from you on your schedule for this important plan that needs to be delivered. And then we're gonna take action by July 1st, but we need to have an idea from you by May. That gives you more time to figure things out internally. Keep us posted, because at the end of the day, you guys are a partner and we wanna see you succeed, Okay? With that, I'm going to pass this to council staff to brief us and then MCEDC for updates.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'll just sort of run through some of the highlights of the packet and point out some of the key topics and then turn it over to MCEDC for a slideshow. This is again part of the FY25 budget follow-ups where there's revisiting some of the discussions from last year, getting a sense of what has progressed during this fiscal year and trying to get an idea of issues to anticipate for next year. By way of background, the council approved a budget of $4.67 million for MCEDC last year. The county executive had recommended a budget of $4 million. MCEDC had requested a budget of $5.95 million, and ultimately the $4.67 million was the $5.95 million difference to the budget divided by three into three tranches, and then one was ultimately approved as part of the broader discussions. MCEDC had raised some concerns about their funding level during the last budget work session, and in fact provided a few scenarios to sort of outline how they would have to adjust their level of service in response to different budget amounts, and that discussion is provided on page 2 and 3. Moving on to their progress and accomplishments to date, I'm sure MCEDC will cover those, but we asked them detailed questions about some highlights of their metrics related to attraction and retention specifically, and they've provided their work plan and their metrics tracking each element and how the extent to which they've made progress on that, and that's in the circle or the attachments to the packet. And they've also provided a summary on page 3. They've noted that they have some significantly improved metrics. They've also provided an update on their FY25 marketing strategy, which was in their work plan. And then council staff also asked them to explain some case studies from the fiscal year that were noteworthy and interesting for the committee to hear. Just to tie this into these more sort of bigger conversations that you all have been having with these work sessions, we also asked them to provide some information about their role within the innovation ecosystem, tying back to last week as well. They provided their response there and note that they certainly connect, prospective businesses with incubators and provide other connective services there. And there may be an opportunity to grow their role within that. And of course, they also provide support to the UM3 IHC, which is a key part of that innovation ecosystem. Council staff, again, as part of this sort of exploring the topic of economic development, asked them to explain what they think some of the gaps are in the economic development apparatus and programming within the county, and they've provided a few answers. They've noted a comprehensive international business attraction strategy might be something worth looking into growing in industrial spaces, and then also looking more broadly at the talent pipeline ecosystem, which was also alluded to on Thursday. Again, keeping with the theme of the follow-ups, council staff asked them how they might adjust their level of service. Going forward, there's the ways to increase their level of service generally are discussed on page 8, but in terms of their FY26 budget, council staff noted that they didn't actually they've ultimately spent more than the $4.67 million that the council budgeted, in part because they tapped some one-time funding through reserves and such in order to maintain their level of service that they think is necessary to complete their work plan. Ultimately, because that number is above what the council appropriated, there may be implications about what the budget level would need to be for FY26. And so we've explained some of that on page 7. Finally, the increasing level of service. This is just that general question we've been asking all of the agencies about what other work they could do with additional funding or to just enhance their level of service. And they provided a few ideas, although no specific dollar amounts associated with some of these things. Yeah, so there's a summary of all those discussion items on page 9, and I know we have a presentation, so I'll just pull that up.
Thank you so much. Before we move to MCEDC, just want to remind the committee a couple of things. One, I thought about a year and a half ago, we have different work sessions on the role of MCEDC. business. You know, we had a session on marketing, another session on retention, another session on attraction, because at the end of the day, that's how we see you roll, those three different areas. They're very important for us. So that's one that I wanted to remind people. The second thing is that this Friday, we're going to hear from the county executive. We're going to see his budget. We cannot wait. So I don't expect you to tell us this is how much we need, because we're going to know what the county executive is going to say on Friday. But take this as an opportunity to highlight the work that you have done with the money that you received, which was less of what you wanted. We know that. And see, and tell us about the opportunities you think we can tackle based on those three goals that you have: marketing, retention, attraction. With that, the floor is yours.
Okay, all right. Thank you. Good morning. I'm Ilana Fine. I'm the CEO of VWG Wealth Management, but today I'm honored to be here as Chair of the Board of Directors of the Montgomery County Economic Development Corporation. First, I want to thank the members of the ECON Committee, the entire County Council, and the County Executives team for your support and patience as we go through an important transition for our organization, especially, as you alluded to, the postponement of the delivery of our strategic plan, and we will provide you an update as you have asked. While it hasn't been as traditional for a board member to be part of our regular presentations to this committee, I do hope that this sets a new precedent to engage more of our board members in this important dialogue. My remarks come at a time when engagement of our board of directors is at an all-time high, underscoring the importance of engaging the business community as much as possible. As you know, we are in the process of searching for our next leader. Andy Chad, president of Minkoff Development, and Ann Kadamian, executive director of University of Shady Grove, are leading our search efforts. In parallel, Jennifer Sin of Clark Enterprises is leading our transition committee to help prepare the organization for new leadership. We have selected a search firm to lead a national search, and we will have the official job posted shortly. At this point, I do want to thank Bill Tompkins for his service as both our COO and CEO. He has helped us stabilize this organization post-COVID and is helping us transition for our next leader. As part of readying for this important search, we have had discussions with many of our stakeholders to help create a profile of an ideal candidate. As you can imagine, we've heard a lot of different opinions, but there's clear consensus that our partners are looking for a leader who can set a vision while also building a strong economic development organization. Through this process, our board also has a clearer understanding of our role and have a better understanding of where we need to lead and where we plan to collaborate with many of the partners here in this room. The County Executive's Office, and partner organizations like the Montgomery County Chamber of Commerce, WorkSource Montgomery, Visit Montgomery, MCPS, USG, Maryland Tech Council, and countless others. We are already seeing some green shoots of these collaborations, which you will hear about more in a few minutes from our team. Given the many issues our county is facing, it is clear that our success is dependent on finding ways to collaborate, communicate, and support each other. Before I pass this to the team, I want to leave you with one last thought. This is a time to be investing in economic development. As my colleague on our board and your colleague on this committee, Marilyn Balcom, clarified for our board at a retreat this fall, our role is to create the economic activity necessary to support the aspirations of our community. Without an investment in economic development through MCEDC, the organization specifically tasked with leading economic development will not be able to attract the leadership or staff necessary to build this organization, and we certainly will not be able to create the economy we need or the community we desire. I will now turn this over to Lori Babb.
Good morning, everyone. Lori Babb, Director of Economic Development at Montgomery County Economic Development Corporation. I'm just going to go through a couple of slides. In your packet, we gave you a lot of detailed information, so I'm not going to repeat a lot of what is in there, but we do want to highlight a couple of major initiatives that we've been working on. Next slide, please, Charlie. Some of our key initiatives, of course, you already mentioned the University of Maryland Institute for Health Computing. The county executive, was very instrumental in making sure that that came here and was open. And we've been working very closely with them since they opened, doing some coordinated joint outreach to the local life sciences community with them. We are co-hosting our first Biotech Connections event with them on April 10th this year. And that's going to be a great way for us to help facilitate some collaborations with the Institute for Health Computing and some of our small local life sciences companies. We'll continue to support that overall outreach. As you know, with the universities at Shady Grove, we will be co-hosting the second annual Innovate ED Summit, Empowering Economic Advancement Through Education and Workforce Development. So we're very focused on that right now. There are some fantastic speakers who are going to be involved that day, and we're looking forward to that. This is a great way to connect government, industry, academia, and create those pathways to success for our local workforce, which I think leads into the how do we get our young folks to want to stay here, work here, live here, and by trying to align industry with the education opportunities and those pathways that we're creating. And the Job Creation Fund, again, in partnership with our Department of Finance team and referring and advising a lot of the prospects that we're working with to submit applications for that. And the marketing that our team did to highlight that program and doing some direct outreach to our local brokerage community to make sure that they understand when they're dealing with the tenants that they're working with, that they are also promoting these programs to the companies that they're interacting with, has been a great initiative for us. And we're looking forward to seeing more applications coming in through that portal. Next slide, please. Some of our other major collaborations with Montgomery County government happening now and coming up in the very near future. We have recently been working with the regional service centers, to put together documents that are highlighting major existing assets for each of those regions in the county and plan developments that'll be coming up for each of those regional service centers. So we're trying to create a fantastic opportunity so that we have universal look for how we're highlighting those assets and plan developments in each of those service centers. The Bio International Conference is coming up. We're partnering with Judy Costello, the county executive, and the state of Maryland folks to attend the largest life sciences trade show, which has over 18,000 attendees every year. It's a great opportunity for us to highlight Montgomery County and the state as the third largest biotech hub here in the U.S. And leveraging those collaborations to meet with and talk to potential companies who may be interested in locating here and creating those synergies. And then also the Select USA Foreign Direct Investment Summit, again, partnering with the county executives team and our state partners to coordinate our outreach efforts to reach international companies across industry sectors. So in a variety of sectors, but mostly in the technology and life sciences sectors who support there. But one of the big things with that is we do support an exclusive local tour of Montgomery County as a spin-off event prior to the beginning of that summit. We've had great success with that, where we get 40 to 50 people on a bus and they get a great bus tour of the county. And again, Judy Costello is very instrumental in helping to pull together the business visits that we offer those international attendees. But one of our great collaborations that we have, and that's going to be coming up very soon.
Thanks, Lori. So I'll talk a little bit about the federal workforce. I know we've had a lot of conversations.
Introduce yourself,
Oh,
please.
yes, Prayas Nupani, Director of Economic Development here at MCEDC. Just want to talk a little bit about the federal workforce and what we're doing to support both employees as well as employers that have been affected. So I know there's been a lot of conversations about the numbers, so I'm not going to go into that. So we know roughly around 70,000 workers here work for the federal government as well as contractors. So we looked at the number of employees that have been laid off nationally. So the average is around 14%, 13.5 to 14%. So if we were to factor that in with the current workforce in Montgomery County, so we predict that around 9,300 employees might be affected by the federal job loss at this point. And that's just on the layoffs. But if you look at the employees that actually took the buyouts, so the average was around 4% nationally. So if you look at that in Montgomery County, that would be roughly around 3,000 employees. So all in all, we're already talking about upwards of 12,000 employees that might be affected by what's going on right now. And that's just on the federal workforce side, right? So we have federal contractors that are equally affected by this. So we saw this with USAID, where roughly about 1,200 employees lost their jobs within a span of a couple of days. And we're yet to see the impact of that come in. And that number is really hard to come by. Can Councilmember Friesen talk about the importance of that? And we do recognize that, but it's been extremely difficult to gather that insights. We are partnering with the Department of Labor, Worksession Montgomery, to figure out a way where we get information in advance so that we can respond to it. Can you go back just one top of it? Yeah. And in terms of the real estate that the federal government owns, so I'm sure you guys saw the list that GSA came out with, where there was 39 properties located in Montgomery County, just over 3.6 million square feet. But that changes every day, right? So I looked at it this morning, that list is completely gone. So we're actively trying to review what's going on there, and we'll update the council as more information becomes
It
available.
was gone within 24 hours.
That's right.
Let's just,
And in regards to the federal contractors, so within our strategic industries, we know there are just about 2,400 federal contractors that work in Montgomery County. So the challenge for us now is, now that we have identified the number, we want to know how many employees work for those federal contractors. And that's going to be a slightly longer process. And we look forward to working with planning as well as Worksession Montgomery and Department of Labor to get that information. Slide, please. So talking about the response, and definitely want to thank the county executive team on this, because they have been a great partner with us. So when we found out about the federal layoffs, what was happening, we wanted to make sure that we were here as a resource, both for employees, but also for employers. So in terms of employees, Worksession Montgomery is our lead agency, and they're doing an excellent job of communicating the resources that are available to employees that are affected, whether it's job fairs that they are hosting themselves or job fairs that are being hosted by partner agencies. But the main goal for MCDC was to bring all the partners together. So we've been having this weekly calls with all the major partners, from different county government to city governments to Chamber of Commerce's, as well as the county executive's office, to talk about what are the resources that are out there and how do we communicate that to our constituents. And a part of that, council member, you talked about launching a site, which hopefully we'll have it done by Thursday. And that will be the go-to site for everyone that has been affected. And part of our messaging around this is, hey, we understand this is a difficult time, but there are opportunities out there in Montgomery County. So we have more than 13,000 private sector jobs that people could benefit from. And we're in the process of identifying what sort of skill sets is necessary and what kind of job titles are there. And we're working very closely with the Worksource to kind of identify that and message that to our community. So the message here is collaboration, right? We're all in this together, and MCDC, along with the county executive's office, will continue to work in this space. Happy to take any questions, but I'm going to turn it over to Stacy, who's going to talk a little bit about FY26 budget.
Good morning, council members. I am Stacy Hardy. I am the Chief Administrative Officer for MCDC. As FY26 is coming up, we won't spend too much detail in terms of going through the numbers, but just to say that we plan to continue our investment on some of the initiatives that we've done this far. We want to make sure that we're intentional with our time and our resources. So some of the things that Lori just spoke about in terms of our continued investment in key initiatives, we plan to do that again in FY26. One of the things that Lori has not talked about is our investment in our long-term relationships. So part of our secret sauce is us getting out and talking to the businesses. So we want to make sure that we're talking to our key employers, our large employers, employers that have recently had investments. So we want to make sure that we're maintaining those connections and deepening those connections as we move forward. So we really want to prioritize that in our FY26 budget request. Another thing that we really want to make sure that we focus on next year is looking at marketing and communications outside of the region. So in the past, we've done a lot of investment here locally, and we want to broaden that in terms of those larger markets that we want to have access to. So we will be focusing on Boston and San Diego, San Francisco, San Diego, because we know that those are prime markets for life sciences and technology. So we're going to continue to do that. And then in terms of engaging the business community, we want to have our economic development forum. So this is another opportunity for us to convene and to get more information on business intelligence that can inform our efforts as we move forward. So we appreciate the opportunity. We appreciate your support, the support of the county. We look forward to having more conversations as we go through the budget process.
Thank you so much for that. Before I open it up, I have a couple questions. Maybe Lori, you may want to have a chair close to. Yeah. Otherwise, yeah, you guys can squeeze it. There you go. There you go. We can all fit in. Beautiful. So you mentioned the before I even say that, Ms. Fine, I think it's a great idea to have board members coming in as you suggested, and we look forward to seeing that happening. It doesn't always have to be you, which we love having you, but you could rotate because we know that you also have a full-time job. So besides this role, so thank you for suggesting that. You mentioned the idea of having more coordination or having some type of report in each regional center in the county. I think that's a great idea, but I'm going to ask you right now, and I'm going to say this as a district council member, you better talk to each council member from that region. There is no way you're coming to my district without talking to me. Or just talking to the regional service because it's a different world. Let's just put it that way.
So I'll tell you where it came from, and then the vision for how we could use it more broadly is when the board, our board of directors, was working on putting together recruitment piece for the CEO, the president CEO position. There was discussion of, can we create a piece that highlights major projects and things that are going on all around the county? So it made sense to coordinate with the regional service center directors. So we did hear from all of the regional service center directors. Each of the reports that we got from those directors, of course, was completely different.
Shocking.
So yeah, so our Manu, Lizio Hashimi, and our marketing team is working on compiling that into one, uniform look, picking just a few of the major assets in each regional service center area, and creating that. So it really came out of a recruiting for the president CEO position piece, so that there could be general explanation of what was going on and the assets in each of the different areas. But then there's been discussion about how can we use this more broadly for other things as well. That's where it came from.
Yes, and I want to thank Lori for also taking the question, because this was certainly something the board and the transition committee, along with Ken Harton, kind of brainstormed and as something that, wouldn't that be helpful for us as the board? So there was never any way we didn't want to ruffle any feathers, certainly by saying we're going into, we're just trying to create like a lookbook to say,
I
here's
love
what's
it.
going on. And I think to really help prioritize, because can't do everything at the same time, and to say, thinking through like where can we start that would create additional economic, activity, et cetera. So
I think
so we look forward to, it's not quite ready for prime time. So we don't have it ready for this group,
That
but I
is-
think it's a great starting point to show collaboration.
That is I think it's great timing too. I would say to you, please take that draft that you have for each region and connect with each council member, district council member, sorry. The two of you to my left, the district, because they're at large, each district council member. And well, yeah, you can do that too, but have meetings with each district council member for each region. And before you release it, I will ask that, please. And I think it's a great initiative, great idea. So I want us to start there. Then the second thing on the trade shows, just because I have had the privilege of going overseas with a county executive in MCEDC. I went to Taiwan, feels like ages ago. The displays, guys, it has to be Montgomery County, Maryland. Nobody cares about MCEDC. It's just, please, no. It's like if you go overseas, nobody knows what that is. You need to display the county and the region, the Washington, D.C. region. So I'm going to say one more time, because even when I see displays in Montgomery County events, at the end of the day, one of your 3 goals is marketing the county, not MCDC. Those are 2 different things. I know I sound rush or harsh, but it's just, I'm just, there's no other way I can say this. And then I love the idea of the bus tour that you guys are having. It would be great if you can please forward to us where are the stops that you guys are making in development. So that's another thing that you can communicate with every council member. I'm sure there are things that we know that you probably don't know. It's just at the end of the day, it's collaboration. But I love the idea. I think it's great. With that, I'm going to pass the mic to Council Member Balcon, who sits as the lead person for the county in MCDC.
Thank you. Thank you for being here today. Just a couple things. I do think the presentations have, in terms of our visuals, have evolved.
Yeah.
So just want to put that there. I also want to say that when we look at the data, the business engagement, we had a long discussion through the years about meaningful business engagement. And I really appreciate MCDC's in looking at a business engagement. It's got to be meaningful, and I appreciate that that change. In terms of the budget, agree it doesn't make sense to talk about the budget today when we're going to see it on Friday. Just want to put a marker out there that this is going to be a tough budget, but we cannot do what we need to do unless we invest in economic development. And sometimes when we get really into the weeds about what's important and what we can and can't afford, we can't afford to not invest in economic development. So I'm just putting it out there. I look forward to hearing about the Job Creation Fund in the next segment of today. I think that's important. And in the packet, there were a discussion about gaps in economic programming, and I thought that was a really good discussion in the packet. But I am concerned about mission creep for MCEDC. We need MCEDC to stay focused on our top industries and our key industries. However, I do want to pull out the light manufacturing, and this might be something for planning to look at, and that is having an inventory of our light manufacturing sites, how much availability we have for light manufacturing, and really a discussion. And this is glad that the chair of the PHP committee's here. We should look at the balance of our light manufacturing zoning in Montgomery County, and because when we look at commercialization of our biotech and the manufacturing aspect of getting product to market, I think is important. So just wanted to pull that up. And of course, talent pipeline, which we talked about in the first piece, and appreciate the summit that you all are doing with USG and your partnership with education. So that's it. Thank you.
Thank you so much. For that, I'm going to ask council staff to coordinate with planning to send us a list of the light industry zones that we have in the county. That'll be great. Council member Lori Sells.
Thank you. Just wanted to note the budget that MCDC made use of, and the, I don't want to say significant cuts that impacted your work plan. Have we looked at what other neighboring jurisdictions are spending, what their budgets are?
We actually are, so there are
Okay.
best practices in terms of what we use what you dedicate of your budget in terms of the, as it relates to the population. So we are
Okay.
actually just starting that work. It's something that we were going to incorporate into our next budget conversation. So we will be able to say what neighboring jurisdictions spend in terms of economic development. Yes.
Really?
There's more. There's more.
Okay. All right, so did you want
But
to?
I will add that our competing jurisdictions spend more. So
Okay,
just to make-
that's what I
Yeah.
thought. So
Yeah,
we're
upwards of multiple,
asking,
multiple millions more dollars. Yeah,
yes.
those that are ahead where we should be investing. Our aspirational partners are spending much more.
And that's good to know because we're asking you to do monumental things to become number one in the region. But if we're not funding you to the levels to ensure that you are able to do the work to market, to attract and to retain the businesses that are going to attract the population that we need to be a thriving county, then we're just spinning in circles. So just wanted to dig into the packet, looking at some of the scenarios that were mentioned. Looking at scenario 1 and 2, what initiatives would be eliminated? You familiar with it's on page 2.
This is
And just to clarify, Councilmember,
Yeah,
that was the
that's-
discussion for the FY 25 budget. That was just providing that context from the last year's budget discussion. So they have changed slightly in terms of what those scenarios might be today. But I'll defer to them.
Okay.
So in terms of the impact, we eliminated a number of positions that would have been tied to developing our strategic plan, for example. So we didn't have that capacity to be able to do that. We had to eliminate positions tied to marketing and communications. We had graphic design support that we no longer have. So it has been very impactful. We did prioritize our business development efforts, obviously, to maintain and be able to satisfy our mandate. But marketing communications was severely cut. And so those two things go hand in hand. So while we prioritized our BD team so that we would have minimal disruption, there's been considerable impact on the marketing and communication side.
Okay, thank you. With regards to the lease expiration campaign, do you have any additional data points? How many businesses were planning to renew? How MCDC assisted those businesses in restoring their lease? What methods you use to engage? Do you have any more information on that?
Yes, council member. So we reached out to over 300 businesses whose lease is going to expire in the next 3 years. And we do have some success stories where businesses have renewed their lease as a part of our outreach. Obviously, we're not the only factor, but certainly talking to them about, hey, here are some of the options, here are some of the incentives have certainly helped us in the conversation. And we can get that list to you. But one thing I will say is the Job Creation Fund has been very impactful for us. So not only in talking to businesses that are located in the county right now, but also businesses that are outside of the county. We have multiple businesses that we're
Thank you.
talking to right now.
I'm asking because in your packet, it says 1,300 businesses were engaged with,
Mhm.
but there's no data on how many were retained, how many leases were renewed. So it's great that you're talking to these businesses, but detailed data on what the benefit to Montgomery County was. Would be
That sounds great.
helpful.
We'll get that to you, Councilman.
Thank you. And then, with regards to, well, I guess if you are going to get some additional information, if you can also share what the actual benefit to Montgomery County was as a result of those engagements. Okay. And of the businesses you have engaged with, being in growth mode, what key sectors are we seeing the most investments in with regards to mergers and acquisitions, venture capital, private equity, foreign direct investment? How are you focusing the outreach given the limited workforce that MCDC has, the limited budget for marketing?
So we're focused on our target industries as we always have been. So life sciences, technology.
No, I mean, how many businesses in each of those sectors are you targeting across those key sectors? because it's very broad, the packet that you've given us. It's just a lot of information, but nothing about the targeted investments or conversations that are happening in these specific industries.
If we, anything that, that would indicate a growth mode or a constriction mode for a company would trigger us to engage with companies in those target industries. So if we see a company has raised $10 million in venture capital, we engage with that company. If we see that.
Yeah,
that a
so
company-
was it 5, 10? If you don't have
Okay.
the information now,
Yeah,
because I'm
it's-
looking at page 4, it's not there. So that's what I'm asking for. If we're having a discussion about data and indicators, it's helpful to actually have data to understand who you're speaking with, in which key sectors you're actually speaking with, and then how that's benefiting. What are we retaining? What are we attracting as a result of those conversations in those key sectors?
Yeah, we should be able to break that down.
Thank you. That would be very helpful. And then how are you affecting the, measuring the effectiveness of the new Montgomery County, Maryland, we're built for business messaging compared to the Be Next campaign?
I'll let our marketing director talk about that, Councilmember.
And please be brief because we're running out of time. I just want to say that.
Sure. Finally, to Hashmi, Director of Marketing, CDC. Thank you very much, Madam Chair and council members. So in terms of we're built for business, we actually did at that point some research in terms of competitor research of what other AGOs were focusing on and messaging and tagline. And what we wanted to do is offer a much more targeted overall message that isn't just generic, but also that is more focused on B2B audience. So our entire strategy for fiscal 25 has been much more specific to the business to business community, and then in particularly to our key industries. So in fact, to answer and to add on to what Lori said, we have actually deployed some marketing campaigns for specific life sciences companies in Boston and San Francisco. And we looked at particular segmentation of companies that have received SBIR and STTR grants, companies that had received early stage venture capital funding. So we can include that in the next data in the next. So we'll know how many.
Yes, we heard about the Be Next campaign. This is a new messaging campaign. So if we're spending money on marketing, what's the result? What has transpired between the last campaign and this campaign? And who's coming up with these taglines to ensure that they are effectively attracting, retaining the sort of businesses that we want? So I don't see that in the packet. Again, it's great that you're telling me what you're doing, but what are the results for what you're doing? You have the Be Next campaign, and I'm not sure what is the return on investment from Montgomery County. It's
Yeah,
not
so
indicated,
I
so.
think in terms of return on investment, we also have to consider that economic development is obviously long-term impact. And so while we can sit here and, certainly in the next packet, I can
Yeah.
offer some data in terms of lead generation, in terms of how many businesses we've reached through our marketing campaigns.
Versus the last campaign would be helpful.
We can do a comparative analysis.
Okay, perfect.
That said, it is a long-term process, meaning just because we are.
Yeah,
doing a
but the
campaign-
process is done because that campaign is over. So
Correct.
we should have the data based on when that campaign started, when it finished, what was the return, and what you're projecting for this campaign.
Yes, we can
Okay.
absolutely add that without a
Thank
problem.
you. All right.
Thank you so much. We have great data in your annual report too. So just wanted to highlight that. Councilmember Glass.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I appreciate this conversation because last time we talked about the budget was during the budget, and the vision for MCEDC and potential new ideas, including the executive's budget reduction, which we as a body ended up adopting. I stated at this committee and at full council, I did not think we should have a budget reduction without having a comprehensive conversation about MCEDC. Too much was happening in real time, and I think it was a disservice. And what we've now learned is that 5 positions were eliminated regarding marketing, outreach, and communication. That's the problem. And so I very much appreciate the chair having this discussion now, a few days before the next budget is released. So technically, yes, we've had it before the budget, but it speaks to the ongoing need for this discussion. And it is a frustrating one. You're hearing the frustration here. Ms. Fine, you have a tough job. You know this. The board knows that I've spoken with many colleagues of yours. And not only were you setting on a course to find new leadership for this body, but now with the churning of the federal workforce changes, many of us were at NIH just on Saturday talking about the reductions to our life sciences industry or federal workforce, which is directly tied and the main reason why we are the third largest biohub in the country. They're inextricably tied, which makes this job search even harder. And so please keep us informed on how that goes, because I think we need somebody who's nimble, who has a vision but is nimble, because nothing is guaranteed anymore, unfortunately, under the Trump administration. So with that, let me just note that I'm glad we're pivoting away from Be Next. I didn't think it meant much. And so as we move forward, I'm glad to hear the rationale for the next marketing campaign, but we might very well need different messages for different audiences. And so just be mindful of that. But this is an ongoing conversation. I know we'll have another one after the budget. Mr. Tompkins, thank you for being here and for your leadership over the last number of years. But this is a difficult situation that we are in. I hope the budget that is presented to us is helpful towards meeting our economic development needs. If the budget that is presented is not helpful towards that, we as a body have to make sure it is helpful towards that. Thank you.
And also helpful to attract a great candidate.
Yes, thank you.
So for MCDC. Last word? No? Oh, great. Thank you. All right. Appreciate it. All right. Thank you so much for the presentation and the level of detail. Next, we are going to have FY25 budget follow-up for the Economic Development Fund. I'm going to ask Mr. Ken Harmon Espada and Ms. Judy Costello, Jean Smith, to please come forward. And I'm going to ask council staff, Mr. Ali, that let's stop by each one of the funds, and I'm going to open it up for questions. Some of them are going to be very quickly. Others are not. So let's be.
Should not be rushing with this.
No, that one, the next session is at 12:30, so I'm hoping that everybody here is okay to leave by 11:45. Is that okay? 11.
I'm just
All right,
saying.
good. So thank you. Mr. Ali, kick it off.
Thank you. So starting on page 2, and just above that, we have a quick background on the EDF, which contains multiple programs, as you are all aware. In FY25, and for FY25, the council approved a $4.17 million budget for the fund. And it's allocated, as you can see on page 2. As for the performance to date, so this has been a very active fund for an FY25, as the county executive team will explain. But just to walk you through table 2, you can see what the approved budget was. You can see that 2.87 million of that has been dispersed to date. That's across 4 different programs. The EDF GLP, which is that grant and loan program, accounts for the bulk of it, but MOVE has been very active to date. There have been 7 SBIR matches as well. And then the Purple Line grants have been going out the door on a monthly basis. There's also been some encumbered funding for the MOVE program in the amount of $845,000. Those are agreements that will be paid. And similarly, another $286,000 encumbered for the remainder of the monthly payments for the Purple Line grants. In addition to that, there are eligible applications for the MOVE program that for which there is not sufficient funding, but technically if there was, those are also awards that could be made. And so the total appropriation, if you account for dispersed and encumbered, remains is around 160,000, with an additional 358 potentially pending. And then we get to the MOVE program, which is the first one that we've called out starting on page 4. You can see that in total between the dispersed and encumbered, there's $1.5 million of awards to be handed out for the MOVE program. And this is at a significantly faster pace than in previous fiscal years. I think during the budget, we showed that it had not exceeded 750,000 over the past 5 years or so. And so the activity is particularly high this year. Some of that has to do, some of the updates to the MOVE are starting to trickle in. So you can see a few of the encumbered awards achieved that sort of new maximum of 150,000. And then there were also a few awards for expansion in general, even if they didn't reach the new limit. And so some of those awards are starting to trickle in, but that process with the executive regulations not being approved until November, most of the MOVE awards were of the original form that prior to the council's update of the program. And you can see some of the data on the average award and size and things like that. But for that, I'll just stop there and turn over the discussion.
I think this is very exciting. I am very proud of this committee really worked together to have an update of the MOVE program, but I do want to recognize the leadership of Councilmember Glass, who really led on this. And I wonder if you have questions or comments. Again, we're going to stop by each one of them, and this is the time, but this is exciting news. Do you have anything?
Thank you very much, Madam Chair, and appreciate the leadership of this committee, right, to identify the needs of our existing tenants and future tenants, to update a program that was on the county rolls, but was not codified, and we know that businesses want certainty, so we provided that certainty by putting it into law and by expanding the scope. And so, Mr. Ali, or maybe I'll turn it to executive staff, actually. So the MOVE program has been oversubscribed regarding the funding. So talk a little bit more about the extra disbursements that are needed, and can you elaborate a little bit more about the businesses to the specific points that I know members of the committee want to know? What businesses have we been able to retain or move to Montgomery County through this program?
And Councilmember Friedson. So I want to start by recognizing this is the EDF is a fund managed by the Department of Finance, and there are bits of it that are managed in different ways. The MOVE program itself is managed by the Business Center, and Teresa Bikila is here, who can answer questions about the types of businesses that are coming in and speak more specifically about that program.
Great, thank you.
Teresa?
Thank you for that question. My name is Teresa Bikila. I am a program manager for economic development programs. So the companies it's a combination of a lot of companies, but for the most part, there are medical practices, there are biotechnology companies, there are fund management, and a whole lot of companies actually that runs through a bunch of industries.
It's great. And I'm going to get ahead of the broader conversation, but as you engage with businesses about the wider range of programs that we have that are going to be detailed in this particular session of our hearing, how do they determine which program is best for them, or how do you speak to the different programs that and options available?
So for the most part, to begin with, we have business liaisons that are out, basically interacting with businesses. So based on that, we get inquiries through the business center emails, and then we reach out to the businesses directly. And we don't talk only about MOVE, but we offer the whole range of economic development programs we have. We give them, and depending on their specific situation, that is what we determine MOVE is the one that is applicable to you, or if it is jobs, then we refer to my colleague, Nadia, and we go from there.
I see Ms.
So,
Cus, yeah, go ahead.
And if I can, Councilmember Glass, so this is a team effort. MCDC plays a major role in marketing all of the programs under the EDF. So whether it's MOVE, whether it's the jobs grant or any of the other programs that finance offers under this, they are one of our front-facing marketers. As they're doing their outreach, they learn what the company needs, and they explain and refer companies to us for the programs.
And I know we have a lot more to talk about, but let me just ask this last question, which I think does help preview the rest of the conversation. In your experience in working with businesses and sharing with them the panoply of options available, are they simply selecting the one that has the highest dollar amount available to them? Is that basically the decision making? I don't know if Ms. Costello. And also I'll add a footnote. This might add to the complexity of the situation, the fact that there are lots of economic development cooks in the kitchen, and businesses might not know who to talk to, and the fact that MCEDC is its own spin-off quasi-governmental organization that is not directly tied to county government, but I'll hold those thoughts for a later time.
Sure. Well, I think as Judy Costello, Manager Special Projects for the County Executive, as Mr. Hartman alluded, it is a team effort with everybody here as well as MCEDC. It does complicate things, but we started more than a year ago to say no wrong door. And we view MCEDC as a promoter. Our office, as Ms. Fanny, Council Chair Fanny Gonzalez and Mr. Glass know from when we were overseas marketing and locally, we promote on the business center under funding incentives and in all of our promotional material. And our partners at MCDC do the same thing. We promote that Lenape, that I won't use a bad narrative, that collection of incentives for companies. And to answer your specific question, typically they will apply for any incentive available to them. And what helps keep us competitive is having a broad range of incentives and many tools in the toolbox. So it is not uncommon for someone to expand and seek now the MOVE funds under the expansion grant. We'll be talking a little bit later about the Technology Innovation and Founders Fund. Some of those same companies have applied for those grants. And Nadia and Dennis will speak in a minute about a couple companies who overlap and also are applying for the Job Creation Fund. And collectively, that may seem to be a lot of options. Competitively, it adds up not necessarily to the huge number for most companies that some of our competitors offer in different ways. So the short answer is they don't go for the highest, they go for everything they can. And we'll talk a little bit more about, having said that, when asked if they could lessen their request and still if our funding would make a difference for them, specifically at the Technology Innovation Fund, our county entrepreneurs said yes, and they wanted strategic use of the funds. We'll talk about that later.
And thank you very much. And I'll end with no wrong door. Is that the term? I think that's great. And want to give a shout out to Gene Smith. When lots of people have reached out to me about the program, I've shuttled it through his door. So thank you for facilitating.
Councilmember Sills.
Thank you. Given the, I guess, overextension of the original appropriation for the MOVE grant, it seems that there are more businesses who want to move here or take advantage of that. Do we know how many jobs would result from that additional appropriation?
Yes, we do. As of the date that we shared the data, we have 867 jobs, initial jobs that those applicants reported. And over the coming 3 years, they promised to add additional 1,500 jobs.
Just from that $300,000 appropriation that we weren't able to meet?
No,
The
we're not-
overage.
I'm talking about the overall in FY25 as of February 28, 2025.
Yes, but I'm talking about the 358,248 that you weren't able to appropriate because you ran out of money?
I
Do
can
you
get that,
have-
Yes. I can get
Okay.
that.
You want to follow up?
Yes.
Yes, okay, thank you, that's.
Council members, welcome.
Thank you. While Councilor Member Glass was speaking, I wrote down no wrong door. So I appreciate that. And this following up from our conversation about the incubators last week, I mentioned this issue of just we have so many different siloed approaches that we need to just remember to work together, which I think the team does. And in particular, when we talk about the incentives that we have available, that everybody is aware of them and knows of them. So I appreciate that. So I do have a question about on page 3. We do have some appropriation remaining. I understand that the MOVE grant is oversubscribed, but there's 160,000 left. Is the intention to spend it all down?
Yes. The EDF accounting works.
Can you please
different-
introduce yourself?
My apologies. Dennis Hetman, Department of Finance. The EDF accounting works differently from typical funds, and it was intentionally designed to give us that flexibility if larger deals transpire. And right now, there is this ever-present in kind of congruency of supply and demand not aligning up. So some programs like MOVE will have considerable demand, others will be slower. And by the fact that each of these funds are fungible and roll up together, it enables us that flexibility. So that 160,000 or so, that's typically our ending balance when you roll everything together. But given all the great work that's coursing through the EDF right now, we anticipate to end 25 right around zero, if not close to a negative balance. So we are working to structure that with OMB in the context of the FY26 recommended budget. We will of course fix that, but it is a difficult fund because it is dynamically, all these are aggregated together.
Okay, so does that mean that some of these MOVE grants might go forward? Or are you thinking that this remaining balance is earmarked for a different type of fund?
We're going to do everything we can to configure it in a way where the volume is commensurate with demand and we can keep the funds flowing to the extent that we can. That doesn't necessarily mean that in FY26 we may need a supplemental appropriation if that demand exceeds supply.
Okay, great. Thank you.
And Councilmember Balcom, to add to that, the administration doesn't want any of these programs to grind to a halt. So we are working to move them all forward. If there is a greater need in one, we'll compensate in another area, and we'll be back to see you in the FY27 budget.
Do you have the answer for Councilmember Sales?
7, over the coming 3 years, 84. And total overall square footage that they're planning to occupy is close to 29,000 square footage.
Wow, okay. I just had a quick follow-up question. Are we anticipating an appropriation from the executive to cover these grants?
I'm going to turn it to the finance. As Dennis, maybe you can explain the EDF fund.
And then if not, how are we prioritizing?
We can't discuss that just yet. It will
Okay.
be in the packet when that is, and the recommended budget is transmitted. But the county executive fully supports this program and will do everything he can to ensure that these are filled.
Yeah, the last thing we want to do is stop and pause and not be able to offer any of the grants that are
Yes.
offered under the EDF.
Yeah, that's a lot of square footage. That's at risk. Thank you.
Thank you so much. No further questions. We can go to the next one.
Thank you. So the next award starts on page 5. We're talking about the grant and loan program under the EDF. There's a quick description of the process that the Department of Finance has to engage in with these businesses and to make these awards. It is a discretionary program, somewhat open-ended in terms of the requirements, but typically they'll enter into an agreement to provide a certain amount of jobs. In FY 25, the largest award total 1.3 million for 5600 Fisher's Lane, which I believe was discussed as part of the FY 25 budget. I think there was awareness that that was going to happen. And that's going to help retain a GSA lease associated with 2,000 jobs. Sodexo also received a $70,000 award, and Federal Realty Investment Trust received a $250,000 award for an additional 420 jobs. I don't have data, or council staff does not have data on pending agreements that may be out there for the EDF GLP, so that may be of interest given the discussion of the fund balance.
Yeah, and that's another distinction for the EDF is it rolls based on appropriation and encumbrances, not actual balances and known encumbrances. So we essentially have teed up for FY 26 1.7 million in deals that will go out the door. We know will go out the door. And then remaining for FY 25, we have about right around 1.6 and a roughly 358,000 remaining for this year across multiple companies that you'll see when they're finalized, but there's still signatures that have to happen on those.
And they're gonna happen when?
By the end of FY 25, so by July. Yeah.
Okay, perfect. Councilmember Fritzen.
Yeah, thank you. I was going to say it before, I'll say it now. We need to be investing in economic development. This is a really important and timely discussion. Appreciate the committee for your work and continued leadership on focusing in and honing in on this. That's an MCEDC budget question. It's also an EDF budget question. And I think both are important, and it's a timely conversation given we'll get the budget on Friday as recommended by the county executive, and the council will have to grapple with that. The 1.7 million, I just want to hone in on that. Is that pipeline? Are those potential deals that may come to fruition? Like you're in discussion, or MCEDC is in discussion, and we're not sure because we're competing against other jurisdictions and we're not sure if the answer is going to be yes. Is that ones that are previously allocated and these are multi-year agreements, and that's the aggregate of the multi-year agreement? So we start FY 26 with 1.7 million. What does that number mean?
That's a great question. And it's an important thing to clarify is that there's a lot of signatures that have to happen on these. There's a lot of elements that we need from the company. We run fiscal impact statements. We need them to show us the jobs and ensure that the data that they're providing, we get in a timely way. So that amount is we know that's going out the door next year. That's not like a pipeline that's kind of.
Okay, I just want to ask the question and get the answer that's more specific to that. That means there's 1.7 million in FY 26 that are already encumbered through previously made deals.
Correct.
That have already occurred. Correct. That the only outstanding question is whether or not they follow through on the requirements of the agreement.
Precisely. Out of the 5 or so steps, they're through 4. We need the 5th, and then the check is cut.
Okay, so just to be clear, I just think it's important because it wasn't clear in the original presentation. 1.7 million is not new economic development initiatives. 1.7 million is to fulfill the commitments and agreements that we've already made, assuming that they come forward and demonstrate that they have fulfilled their end of the bargain. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay, I just think it's really important for us to understand that that is part of the conversation. Obviously, that is the absolute baseline. We have to fulfill our commitments and our obligations. We have to have the funding in the budget in order to do that. We also need to be investing in economic development. 1.7 million in that case is just fulfilling our obligations. It's not investing in new economic development. So I just think it's important that that be highlighted and noted. Thanks.
Thank you so much for that, Councilmember Fritzen. We are gonna move on to the next one. Do you have one question? Okay, go ahead.
Regarding the provision, the clawback provision, since the 1.3 was granted to support the retention of GSA, I know that they have since their lease is expiring, they plan to not renew the lease. Have they fulfilled the expected duration of their lease?
I can follow through on the exact specifics and get those back to you. I didn't have that ready to go today. My apologies.
Okay, because just want to make sure that we are following through on any clawback provisions, any repayment provisions. I don't know if there are any outstanding provisions, anyone who has lapsed on their retention requirements that we're aware of, and if we are working diligently to evaluate and go after these funds. And I didn't see anything in the packet regarding that.
We have.
Can you introduce
processed-
yourself, please?
Nadia Khan, Fiscal and Policy Analyst with the Department of Finance.
Mhm.
For calendar year 2024, we have pursued 3 clawbacks, and you'll receive more detail on those in the annual report, which we're working to finalize and send over.
Mhm.
And then for this year, we are going through our reporting, and we'll be, evaluating and making sure that all of our projects that are in the pipeline are up to date in terms of all the deliverables that our companies have in terms of their reporting. Once we evaluate that, we'll be able to process another set of clawbacks, which we hope we don't have to do. But to answer your question, yes, we are tracking that, and we have all the data to share for the prior calendar year. Is just how we organize our annual report. So you'll see some of that coming
And do we
soon.
have any outstanding clawback provisions that we're waiting on
We are not waiting right now for anything to come in at this moment.
prior to 2024, FY 24?
Correct.
Nothing. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you so-
Mhm.
Councilmember says we were more than happy to come in and chat with you about specific companies that you may have
Okay.
questions about. Happy to have those conversations offline.
Thank you very much, Council Staff.
Thank you. So now we're on page 6, talking about the SBIR STTR Local Matching Grant Program. For FY 25, $140,000 has been dispersed for 6 businesses, and 1 business received a phase 0 and a phase 1 award. That number is right in between the amount dispersed in FY 23 and FY 24. It's a relatively small amount allocated for the for the fund overall. The committee may just want to understand if there's any more anticipated demand, and maybe what factors sort of help explain these trends in demand for this, if any.
Anyone from the county executive team, please?
Thank you again. Budget wise, I think we should be okay. So we have $200,000. We've spent 140 already. We have 6 applications that went through. We have 3 more applications that we're working on, and I do expect more applications that I'm working with. So the focus this year for the most part is on phase 0, which is only $5,000. So I think we should be good.
The phase 0 is to help companies who have never received an SBIR before win their first SBIR. Anecdotally, in response to your question, we are hearing from companies that with all the changes at the federal workforce, their potential awards have been put on hold. So we're waiting for that. That may, in all transparency, it's beyond our control, but it may impact the potential pipeline for Mr. Picala's program going forward. I also wanted to real quickly, he was doing some more analysis on council member sales or earlier question about that $300,000 if it were not funded. He gave you the 28,000 square foot and the number of jobs tied to that. He just also verified that of that dollar amount represents 10 companies, 6 of whom would be new leases in the county, first time ever, and then 4 of whom are expansion leases. And I think you'll hear with the other programs that we're about to discuss that they are being used both by companies in the county, and also it's as an attraction tool for the new leases and new companies coming new to the county. Thank you for providing that.
Thank you so much. I don't see anybody for right now. One more. Okay, let's go.
Yeah, so just wanted to get more information about the disbursement of the microloans if you have any,
Haven't been there yet. That's the next one.
oh,
Yeah.
okay, go.
So I think, yes, so maybe council staff can kick us off.
Yeah, council member Sales is hitting on the only question that council staff raised about this, which is just that this money is appropriated to the fund and then allocated out to contractors that provide the loans directly. So just wanted to confirm that that money was dispersed, to council member Sales' point, just because it didn't show up in the roll-up that council staff provided earlier, but it sounds like it has, having conferred with Department of Finance staff prior to the conversation.
Any updates from county executive
Correct, that
team?
has been dispersed. It was a slightly lesser amount. I think it was budgeted for 150, or we're at right around 100 right now, but we anticipate to fully fund that.
Is there a reason why we haven't fully dispersed all of the awards?
Just volume, it can slow.
Capacity at the county executive? Like what do you mean? Volume? How many businesses is this money going to? We're cutting checks to how many businesses?
Yeah, I don't have that number, but I can get it for you.
Okay. Because some of these businesses, these are make or break funds that they need to
Absolutely.
stay in the county, to, get equipment, hire someone. So if we can get an update on when those funds will be dispersed, that would be really helpful.
Certainly.
And an update on the geographical locations of where this money's going in the county, and any other demographic information you have to share. Thank you.
Okay, no further questions on this one. Let's move on to the next one.
Thank you. There's a small section on the Purple Line Small Business Impact Grants. You can follow up, but there was a joint work session on February 10th on that. Moving on just to the Jobs Initiative. The Jobs Initiative is administered through the EDF. It was a $20 million supplemental appropriation in the FY24 budget using one-time funding from undesignated general fund reserves. It created 3 distinct funds: the Job Creation Fund, which is a by right program awarding businesses for hiring individuals earning over $100,000 in the county. And the other 2 funds are application-based, where businesses apply for funding towards projects that help them commercialize their work. The Technology and Innovation Fund focuses on businesses in strategic industries on the cutting edge of technology, and the Founders Fund it helps target that funding towards underrepresented communities and businesses with a more general scope. The Job Creation Fund is, like I mentioned, is by right. And so there have been applications for it. You can hear from the Department of Finance for an update on the most recent number of applications, but just by the nature of it, they have to take in the applications and then they will disperse money as there is evidence that individuals have been hired, and they may get applications prior to the plan to hire certain individuals, right? They know that they will, or they know they'll be moving here, but they haven't done that yet. And so the money goes out incrementally as those milestones are achieved. And so for that, that is one of the main reasons that the 10 million in that fund will not be dispersed in FY25. They don't see it being dispersed in FY26 or FY27 either, just given the pace of following up and ensuring that the activity is funded as intended. For the other 2 funds, we have a slide deck, and Ms. Costello can explain the activity there, but the fund closed at the end of last year. They received applications and are currently reviewing all of those. They received a lot of documentation about the project. They have other background information to vet the candidates. They work with a consultant called FedTech that has helped provide some of their expertise in evaluating this and really coordinating that whole effort. And I've had some exposure to that as well. And you can see the total number of applications that were eligible and received under each of the funds. The results of that is still ongoing. And so we haven't presented what the status is in terms of how much money will ultimately go out the door. And just one note on the Founders Fund, which I'm sure Ms. Costello will explain, the large number of ineligible applications compared to eligible applications for the Founders Fund It's something that they flagged. They're continuing to work with businesses that were ineligible to help them understand why they may have been ineligible. But one of the reasons was just maybe not necessarily meeting the criteria of the program just because, but maybe trying to go after it because there's money available, but not necessarily meeting some of the criteria for the fund, basically. But Ms. Costello can explain further. And with that, I guess I can pull up the slides.
Well, we're going to this one or to the job creation week?
Should
Do
be
you
all
want to talk
three
about job
funds.
creation first, or do you want to hear the presentation on technology innovation?
I'm gonna leave it up to you, whichever you think works best.
15 minutes.
Okay. So- While we're waiting, okay, despite the fact that we're ready, I just want to, usually I just, Mr. Gene Smith, who you all know well, ordinarily would be sitting here. I just want to take a second to publicly thank him for his leadership with the Business Center and many of the programs that we have talked about on Friday and here today. So thank you for letting me do this, as I next will see him on your side of the table. So I know we don't have a lot of time. This is a summary of data for a program that is very actively ongoing. This is specifically the $10 million funded through the jobs grant on the ECON for the technology innovation and founders grants. Sir. We're at opposite ends of the table here. Okay, so as you know, we that resolution initiated by Council Member Friedson and with support of the executive and administration was passed in May of last year, with separating that fund into 7 million. That funders should say founders, 7 million for technology innovation. And the founders grant is $3 million. But the main thing to focus on here is that we were tasked to give this money for commercialization grants for projects that will advance from market to commercialization and create new sales, more research, and eventually new jobs. Next, please. This I don't know if you have a printout of it. I'm happy to provide it afterwards, but this is a timeline of how we've moved forward with the program. The county executive's office picked up this after working with MCEDC on the job creation fund and working through the possibilities with our partners at MCEDC on how to best manage the program. And as you already shared, the view was that MCEDC's primary task is promotion, job recruitment, and retention. The county executive office has a lot of outreach and responsibility. Neither one of our organizations who were tasked to manage $10 million had the capacity on its own to judge commercialization for an unknown, as of September, number of companies and projects and what they're doing. So we made the decision to seek we jointly made the decision to seek a third-party commercialization expert, and to do it quickly and nimbly. We leveraged MCEDC and their capabilities. We interviewed several firms, and the firm FedTech was chosen. Mr. Councilmember Friedson had the opportunity to meet with them after that choice was made and learn a little bit more about their background and their commercialization expertise. They picked up, the contract was signed in October, and they immediately started working with our office on turning that resolution into meaningful criteria for an application, into an application portal, into a notice of funding opportunities, eligibility requirements. Some may think it's obvious that if you want funding in Montgomery County, you should be headquartered here or doing most of your R&D here. You should be in good standing with the state of Maryland. When you put out a notice that you are offering $100,000 or $200,000 in awards, a lot of people will apply whether or not they hit those targets. We spent a lot of time going back, and I should say also with our colleagues at the Department of Finance, who have and take very seriously their fiduciary duty with the disbursement of these grants. So there was interaction between FedTech, with companies, with our office, with the Department of Finance, and with MCDC on the criteria requirements. Though the NOFO and let me back up and say, we originally thought in September we would announce 2 rounds of grants and come here and tell you, again, we had no idea whether 10 people were going to apply or 148 who actually applied. We wanted to be able to come here. We had a sense that there was demand and that this would be well received, but we weren't sure. So we originally contemplated 2 rounds of grant application analysis and funding. And after discussion and dealing in the details, we realized it was better to take a minute, do everything as close as we could to the best practices, which takes a little bit of time when you're working with county regulations and innovator requirements. And we decided to issue 1 round of funding. Councilmember Friedson, MCDC, and our office, all were called. My company, we want to apply, but we've raised more than $5 million, which was the cap for requirements. My company, we want to apply, but we have no money. We need the money for seed. So we did have a discussion with council and with our office that said, let's put out a request, a call for applications. If we have funding left over, we will look at expanding the aperture of the criteria. But let's see what the demand is and what types of companies come in. And that's what we did. So we announced and started promoting the program in November. In December, we opened the application portal. It actually closed on January 31st of this year. And even before it closed, FedTech, our third party, started reviewing the applications for eligibility. Now, these applications aren't just pagers. They're asked to submit a commercialization project, a budget that aligns with the research, show the potential job impact, show what they're going to do, provide documentation that they have at least 1 full-time employee so that Nadia and I or anybody don't come up with an idea and apply for 200,000. Those requirements take a lot of time to do due diligence. They've been actively working on that. After companies were deemed as eligible, FedTech, with 13 members of their team participating, started scoring the applications based on their commercialization expertise. And then late February, they presented an initial list of companies recommended for approval to a selection review committee comprised of board members from MCEDC, a diverse group of board members with technical expertise in business management and biotech, life sciences, and then a very diverse group of investor, biotech, and advanced technology folks at FedTech. And then Mr. Bilal also joined to observe and watch and participate in the process. At the time that we presented, we could have taken a very easy way out. More than 104 applicants applied for $7 million of grants, each up to 200,000. We could have taken the first 35 that we knew were eligible and recommended as strong candidates. However, we decided to go back to them and say, do you really need $200,000 to move your commercialization project forward? And to the credit of entrepreneurs in our county who recognize the best use of funds is important for them and county taxpayers, they doubled the amount of money and companies that may be available to companies. So they responded to an email that we sent them about 2 weeks ago with very specific, I really need the 200,000 or 150,000 will move this forward and help me grow jobs. And our initial pass at that information showed that instead of funding only 35, we expect that we'll be able to fund closer to 70 companies. What that means is more due diligence going back to the next level. Be careful what you ask for, but it's been very thorough and very valuable. The other thing is for the number of ineligible, and I guess we should go ahead to a couple of slides. Let me pause on that and real quickly, since we have this, what type of project is this? We estimated, probably underestimated, that we have spent 1,516 hours on this project to date since September. That's more than one person a year, if you think about, but instead of having a an illustrious person from our county, from MCEDC. We have been able to bring in expertise by leveraging everybody I've already mentioned. FedTech does do billable hours, so they've added up their hours. We've estimated ours. You can see, by the way, the marketing that FedTech alone did that talks about 6,000 social media impressions, site views on the landing page. That does not include, and we'll later have, MCEDC's social media. I can tell you from my little personal account, when I announced this funding program, not only did it get a ton of hits, I got a lot of, because I used to work in Virginia, I got a lot of, I wish we had this program here from Virginia. So skipping to the next slide and back to what we were talking about before. Here's the overview of the companies. 144, the number of employees that they report they have. This is reported because we haven't had time to view all the payroll. Look at the increase in full-time employees, they say, if awarded funds. These projects, the companies will have up to 18 months to complete the projects. Do I expect that they'll immediately hire everybody? No, some of these are longer-term projections. Again, you're getting this information real time as we're still going through the process. But they did have to report if they have proprietary technology, issued patents, patents that they expect to file. You'll see the ineligible numbers that Bilal talked about before, and I'll talk about that a little bit more in the next slide. What I wanted to let you know is last week, knowing that we have this money about to give, but wanting to be certain that every company deemed ineligible was actually ineligible. In a federal program and some of the other programs, if you're ineligible, that's it. We went back and contacted every single ineligible candidate, and there are a couple more that will be eligible, which means they will need to be scored and they will be ranked and thrown in the pool before we announce them. Next, please. So some of the lessons learned while still in this program, and this relates to our conversation Friday and earlier conversations today. We are in the center of the #3 biotech, but look at the other innovators in the county and the fields that they are in. Councilmember Balcom mentioned light manufacturing. That's under advanced manufacturing. You see cyber, clean tech, ag tech here. I am happy and proud that all parts of the county, including Germantown and Silver Spring and Potomac and Bethesda and Gaithersburg, all are recommended. If you look at the reasons why the companies were not eligible, I already referenced the amount of money that the company started with. This program was not offered to retail or professional services only companies. We would be giving it to every very good and strong and important employer in our county who is in the legal profession, the IT services profession, medical practice. So we said no, but we still have, particularly in IT, companies applying for the tech innovation grants. On the Founders Fund, I spoke with a half dozen founders last week. I have promised and will be promising to the remainder of ineligible candidates who we get back to this week, a meeting later this year with me. Let me say two things also about this. Once we award the, I guess you could go to the next slide. Once we make a notification of an award to a candidate, what happens? They will get a letter saying, congratulations, you've been selected to receive a grant of X amount for Y project. Or they'll receive a decline letter. If they receive an award notice, they then will be directed to our Department of Finance to sign a grant agreement. They will be asked to complete 1 hour of coaching with FedTech. That is part of the money that we've already committed for this FY25. Before they get the disbursement, they then will get half of the disbursement and they will be required to report on the use of those funds before the later disbursement. That's a lot of work. FedTech covers part of that. Part of that work is by my colleagues sitting to my right who do not have extra staff to manage that, but will be overseeing the reporting and the grants and the disbursements. If a company is declined, we are hoping that in the budget you received Friday, to have funds to support FedTech, continuing to manage basic reporting and to offer 2 hours of coaching to a declined applicant, including the ineligibles who may not have a proprietary technology. And we'll be working with them to make sure they have the right business consultants. But that is in the dollars that we propose. That's help for those who are awarded to make best use of funds. That's help for those who are not awarded to help move their business forward. In addition, I will ask that a business liaison member from our business center meet with every one of the founders members. And we will have that connection so that they know everything that the county has to offer, whether or not they are a technology commercialization project.
I'm just gonna interrupt you very quickly. And looking at the time, guys, this is a briefing. I'm just gonna put it out there. We need to be out of here in 5 minutes. But everything that you're saying needs to be when you're speaking and remembering the conversation that we had for the incubators last week. And I hope the third-party conversation that we have on the incubators matches with this, because those founders, applicants can easily merge into this other effort that we're doing. So I hope that's reflected on the budget we're getting on Friday. If not, we're gonna have to fix it when it comes to the county council, because things need to be in coordination. That's all. Do you have something else?
We about finish everything.
Yeah, well, I'm gonna open it up to Council Member Frickson for this one, and then we're gonna go please keep it brief, guys.
All right, just really quickly, I very much appreciate the briefing and all of the work. The idea behind these three funds was sending a strong message. If you are willing to invest in Montgomery County wants to invest in you. We need to work together to grow the economy, to stem the tide of some of the data that we saw earlier that was increasingly sobering, and the demand, the job numbers, the interest that these funds have received is really encouraging. And I'm particularly thrilled with the geographic and the industry-based diversity. You know, one of the goals was to be intentional here, and we have intentionality with the diversity of the funds. But the key was we also wanted geographic diversity. We also wanted industry-based diversity, and we're seeing that reflected in the data. And I think that's just really important to note. I will express again my frustration. This took too long to get off the ground. It's frustrating that it took until September just to figure out who was on first and to work out the responsibilities between MCEDC and the executive branch. That has to be better. We have to do better moving forward. And as we talk about investing in economic development, as we talk about moving forward with these programs and others, as we have that budget conversation that we're going to have, the relationship between the executive branch and Economic Development Corporation, both of whom play critical roles in economic development, has to be much more seamless. And if we're going to use the talking point that there's no wrong door, we have to demonstrate that there's no wrong door. And that means working out our processes in a much more seamless, much more efficient way. Having said that, since that has been determined and decided, even though it was many months later than I would have preferred and hoped, it took 6 months longer than I think it should have. FedTech has been a great partner. I was encouraged when I met with them to see their expertise, and the proof seems to be in the pudding, that this seems to be a process that's moving in a good direction. So it took too long. It was too delayed. It needs to get better moving forward. But I think this in particular is heading in a really positive direction. On the coaching, I love the idea of coaching the ineligibles, also in keeping connected with those who receive funding. This shouldn't be a one and done relationship. It has to be an ongoing relationship. And I see this as an opportunity to build that partnership between the public sector and the private sector that we desperately need. I would also encourage that the coaching connect with our local chambers. Looking at a former chamber executive right here, the Amber program and the Black Collective and some of our other key partners who can be part of that coaching, who do this as part of their core competency, and frankly, are probably more equipped to do some of that coaching than the executive branch or even MCEDC is capable of doing. So really leveraging those partnerships. I did want to follow up, and it doesn't have to be now because I know we're short on time, but I would like, similar to the line of questioning before with the MOVE program and some of the other programs, and I know some of this work is still happening, but exactly the number of requests, the 104 that came in, a breakdown then of the total amount that would have been eligible if they were able to max out based on, what we could have allowed before you sent that email, and our do-gooder businesses were willing to accept less in order to get their foot in the door. But it would be helpful to know exactly how many jobs are being created and what investment is going to be received by the number of companies, that 70-ish number that you think you're going to ultimately land on. And as quickly as we can get that information will be helpful. And what would it be if we had unlimited funds, just based on the eligibility criteria? And what would the jobs be for that? What would the investments be for that? What would that look like? If we could get that detailed breakdown, I think it would be helpful, because it would be instructive for us as we head into the budget and figure out how much funding that we need. And I just love the idea of, we wish we had this program here, and getting that feedback. I will note, I heard from a lot of folks who weren't eligible for this, but want to be eligible for something else. And I will just reiterate, it speaks to the value of this program, but also the broader need for us to be investing in economic development, to supporting our local businesses, to partnering between the public sector and the private sector in order to stem the tide of this sobering data that we've seen, and in order to grow a local economy. So thank you, and I'll yield back.
Councilmember Balkin.
Thank you. So I know it's early to assess the program, but I appreciate the data that we received here today. And I do want to thank Chair Fanny Gonzalez for these pre-budget sessions. They've been very important. I think this is the last one, considering that we're seeing the actual budget on Friday. But they were a good opportunity to ask questions, knowing that these were not intended to have all the data, but you now have an idea of the data that we're looking for. So I appreciate both MCDC and the county executive branch should just have a feel for what when we get to the budget, we'll need a lot more data. So wanted to mention that. From the ineligible candidates, I think it's important to that it's not the last time that we hear from them. However, in terms of resources available, there are two types of ineligible candidates. There are people that just had no business applying in the first place. And then there are other candidates who missed it by this much, or they're on their way. And so I think that when we look at the consulting and what we do with some of these, that the resources are allocated to the ineligible candidates who we, of course, we want to encourage all businesses in the county, but there are some that probably are ineligible just because they're not even companies. So just wanted to bring that up.
Thank you so much for that. Councilmember Sells.
Yes, just wanted to get clarification on the eligible companies. When do they receive the money? Do they receive it up front, or do they receive it after a year of employment?
Good question. So they will receive it as soon as they complete a grant agreement. They will have they will receive information on how to complete a grant agreement, get signed up with the county vendor system, and a requirement for an hour of coaching. And then they will get a disbursement of half of the total amount requested, and so that they can get started. And then upon submission of the reports, up to 18 months from the date of that agreement. But if they finish their project in a year, they'll get the money sooner. So.
Okay, thank you.
I am honestly very proud of the executive team, also MCEDC, for working together. I thought you guys moved really fast. I mean, we didn't even have money for this fiscal year. It was taken from another fiscal year. And as Councilmember Friedson mentioned, the third party that you hire, what's it called? EdTech. Awesome work. Looking at the circumstances. So I think it proves that we do mean business in Montgomery County when we work together. And I look forward to what's next for all of us into that budget on Friday. With that, we are adjourned.